Welcome to Kat's Candid Conversations. Kat McKeno is an award-winning journalist who has interviewed compelling people and organizations from around the world who make a difference.
Welcome, Rabbi Pastkoff.
Thank you.
It's great to have you today.
It's good to be with you.
First question. Why did you decide to be a rabbi? What happened, and when did that happen?
I was actually in high school. My mother gets all the credit for this. She pointed out that my friends were all friends from my synagogue, not from my high school. The place where I enjoyed hanging out the most was at the synagogue. And of course, when she suggested, why don't you become a rabbi? I said, are you crazy? But then, sure enough, this has been my path, and she was right. And I've been pursuing this ever since I was, I guess, a sophomore or junior in high school.
Why would your mother want you to be a rabbi?
It's not that she wanted me to. She was observing what I was doing, where I was spending my time, who my friends were. And I was taking my own classes as a high school student. I was a high school aide in a class for younger kids. I was involved in youth group. So 3 or 4 times a week at least I was in the synagogue.
And was your mother religious?
Interestingly, my parents became more involved right after my bar mitzvah. They became very involved. They were that generation, the children of immigrants who ran away from their Judaism. They didn't want to be associated with it. That's the old ways. That's the old country. We're living in America now. And then slowly they found their way back. And they got very involved. My father was president of the temple. My mother, who right now is 97 years old, still does volunteer work for the temple. So this has been a big part of my journey and my family's journey ever since.
They were Reformed, or were they?
So they were raised in what I call immigrant Orthodox, meaning that they weren't really that Orthodox, but that was the only thing they knew from their parents who grew up in, well, now we know it was Belarus. When I was a kid, it was Russia. And this is what they brought with them. So it's not that they kept kosher because they were philosophically kosher. It's they had no idea that you could cook a piece of pork. And so that it was repulsive to them, not because the Torah says don't, but because they had never been exposed to it in any way. Milk and meat, a cheeseburger was, why would you do that? But this is what they grew up with, so that's what they kept. They ran away from that, and when they returned, they actually returned to a Reform synagogue because my father liked the rabbi's sermons and liked the music. They were not ideologically anything beyond Jewish. They looked for the synagogue that they liked the best.
Were they first-generation Americans?
They were first-generation Americans. My parents and my grandparents on both sides were all immigrants.
And where did they land when they came?
Typical New York story. They landed on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. From there, eventually, they took the ferry across to Brooklyn. And from there, when my parents got married, the typical American dream, move out to the suburbs, own a little piece of land, own your own home.
I see. So you were with groups, Jewish groups, the synagogue, but what made you become a rabbi? I mean, what was it that inspired you, besides your mother saying, be a rabbi? I mean,
besides my mother, my rabbi as a child was a social activist. He was someone who did voting rights in the Deep South in the 1960s. He was someone who traveled to South Africa to visit Stephen Biko. He was someone who traveled to Ireland to visit Bobby Sands in prison. These were the stories that I grew up with. So it wasn't a belief in God necessarily. It was having a Jewish voice for the concerns that I grew up with for the whole world around us.
So you thought you could become an activist by being a rabbi?
That's the model that I had in front of me. Rabbi Harold Saperstein, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be a blessing.
And do you think you've accomplished that? Are you an activist? And what kind of things are you active in?
I am not as politically active as he was. I have been involved over the years in addressing homelessness here in Lancaster. I have spoken at gun violence prevention rallies, at LGBTQ plus gatherings. I have spoken at gatherings when the Klan threatens to march through Lancaster. I have written periodic columns. I write 6 times a year in the Lancaster newspapers, often about current issues that I view through a Jewish lens. So I've accomplished some of that. I have not reached his level of activism, but certainly something that inspired me.
What is a Jewish lens?
I believe that we shouldn't just be, what I do as an individual is one thing, what I do in the name of Judaism is another. And I believe that has to be informed by Jewish text and Jewish tradition and Jewish history. So, for example, it's not just about worrying about climate change. The Torah is very specific in the 2nd chapter of Genesis that we have to guard and protect and keep the earth. It's actually interesting. It says, we serve the earth, not that the earth serves us. Now, interestingly, in chapter 1, the earth is there to serve us. Right? Same book, both in Genesis, 2 different ways of looking at it. When we look at poverty, I'm looking at the Torah where it says that when you glean when you gather in the harvest of your fields, you should leave a portion unharvested so that the poor can come and take what they need. So all of this is informed by Jewish text or Jewish tradition or Jewish history. When we're looking at immigration and refugees in this country, my mother will often say to me, I don't understand, why can't they come into the country legally? It's not a hostile comment, it's an uninformed comment. And I said, Ma, you were lucky that when your parents came to this country, immigration policies were a lot less stringent. If they waited 30 more years, they likely would have been murdered during the Holocaust. When we couldn't get into this country, when legislation had made it so that immigration was much more limited. So again, our history, our sacred texts.
What do you think of ICE?
Not a big fan. I believe that we need to be concerned about immigration. I believe we need to be concerned about our borders. But I also think there's a level of cruelty right now that we're witnessing that is completely uncalled for and unhelpful, by the way. We'll hear statistics that say so many fewer people have gotten across the border. But how many people are suffering? There's a poem that I've read a number of times called Home. It says one of the lines is, you only leave your home when you're in the jaws of a shark. Now, are there people who are looking to capitalize on the drug trade? And absolutely. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I am saying that most of the people who want to come here, make a brand new start, are looking for the same thing my grandparents were looking for and are ready to the country that gave them that.
How do we do that when so many are coming over?
You know, I've never been one that says we should have open borders. I do believe in a comprehensive, compassionate immigration policy. And honestly, I believe this is one of those issues that neither party really wants to resolve. They'd rather hit each over the head with it than come to a real resolution of it. Because that would mean that they have to work together. So instead of saying, look at us, we are the ones who have the answer, it means coming to a bipartisan solution, sitting down together, hammering out the details of something that is both compassionate and thorough in every way. There will always be the ones who get caught sneaking over the border. We know that. But I think there's a comprehensive, compassionate answer.
So bipartisan solution.
Imagine that, bipartisanism.
It's hard to imagine these days, isn't it?
You know, I always I was talking to someone just today. I think the last great effort at bipartisanship was the McCain-Feingold Act that was proposed on campaign finance reform. Never passed. But you had John McCain, a reasonable Republican, and Russ Feingold from Wisconsin, a reasonable Democrat.
Yeah.
And they both recognized the need for campaign finance reform. And it was defeated because greed and the desire for power got in the way of people saying, you're right, I shouldn't be accepting money from that individual or that PAC. We should come to some kind of resolution about this. But I forget what year that was. John McCain's been dead a long time already. And Russ Feingold has been out of the Senate for a long time already. It's time for us to get back to that spirit of bipartisanship.
Do you think it's increased the animosity both parties have for each other now?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I look at things like when our local Congressman Smucker was in his first term and he was primary challenged as his first term was coming to an end. And what was he challenged on the basis of? I think I have the number right. He only voted with Donald Trump 96% of the time.
96% he voted.
And that was only 96% of the time. So this idea that we're supposed to fall in line and just follow the path that the party lays out for us and not think for ourselves. Interesting. Again, during Congressman Smucker's first term, with the Jewish social activism, I was on a program with the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism in Washington. Congressman Smucker was very kind. He met with a group of us in person, and we happened to be talking about immigration reform that day. And I said to him, Congressman, I believe that Lancaster County is genuinely proud, not Democrats, not Republicans, but genuinely proud of our record in resettling refugees and welcoming immigrants. And he said, of course. And I said to him at that point, so you have a decision to make. Are you going to represent your constituents, or are you going to represent the White House? He nodded his head. Well, we know how that ended up. Now, he might argue that, of course, he's representing his constituents, because even if he doesn't fully agree with it, to get reelected, to have the right chairmanships and committee appointments, he has to go along sometimes.
He has to compromise.
Right? But where do you choose to compromise? And at what price?
I think Lancaster had the highest number of refugees that they were taking in a few years ago. Lancaster
was written up in both the BBC and the New York Times as being the per capita refugee capital of the United States. And again, informed by our history, if you go back to the 1930s, at least 36 Jewish refugees from Germany and German-occupied Europe pre-World War II found a home in Lancaster County.
So did a lot of other religions.
Yes.
The Amish, the Mennonites, 250 years ago.
Absolutely.
So you came to Lancaster 30 years ago, and you were only going to stay for 5 years. What happened?
In 1993, this was my 3 to 5 year plan. And, life happens. I found a good community, a community that was doing good things. Eventually, my mother-in-law moved here. My wife started her own nonprofit here. Our kids grew up here. So, because it was a community where we could all grow, we've stayed here as long as we have.
How many members do you have in your congregation?
We have about 320 households. So I don't know what that translates into in terms of individuals. I'm guessing somewhere between 700 and 800.
What are the concerns of your congregation today? What are they anxious about?
The same thing that Jews all over the world are anxious about. We're concerned about anti-Semitism. We're concerned about social policy. We're concerned about social justice. We're concerned about giving our kids Jewish upbringings that are going to last and endure in their lives. But if you talk to Jews around the world today, the biggest concern is anti-Semitism. Now, I will say, in terms of violent anti-Semitism, Lancaster has been a bubble. Unlike a lot of major American cities, and not so major American cities, as well as places in, last week it was England and Germany. It might have been Canada. A couple of months ago it was Australia. Places where we thought we were safe.
Or London, when they killed 2 people just because they were Jewish.
Absolutely. So these are the lingering fears. I visited in someone's home yesterday. We put a mezuzah on the door. They were commanded to write these words on the doorposts of our house, a ritual object that we attach to our doorposts. These folks wanted it where it belongs. I've had people say to me, well, I feel like I'm not quite safe if I put it on the outside of my home.
Mezuzah have prayers in it. Right?
It's a passage from the Torah that includes the passage that we say is the watchword of our faith, the passage from Deuteronomy that says there's only one God.
Now, you also mentioned to me when we were talking before that you were called to a school. Can you explain what happened there?
So I said that violent anti-Semitism is something we've escaped. There are other forms. There's a good deal of ignorance. Most recently, 2 different school situations. One where 2 students were involved in passing notes to each other. And I do believe it was accidental. A note got left behind that included a drawing of someone with the Hitler salute. Another school had a swastika carved into the bathroom wall, into the divider between the stalls. So these things exist.
Do they know who did it?
In the first case, yes. In the second case, no. I will say that parents who have children in both schools, and I'm in full agreement, we're not as concerned with punishment as we were about education. We saw these as teachable moments, and we wanted to be able to participate in that with the individuals, but also with the school community. In one case, the schools were very receptive. In the other case, we've hit some resistance.
What do you mean resistance? And how?
The schools have not been as welcoming. One particular school.
Are they middle? Sorry to interrupt you, but are they middle schools?
One is a middle school, one's a high school.
Okay.
In the middle school in particular, in a district with several middle schools, some of them were open and receptive and eagerly invited me in, and one has kept me out.
Why?
I don't know.
Do you have any idea? Why do you think they would keep you out when you want to talk about anti-Semitism?
I am perfectly willing to have someone say to me, Jack, we heard you're a horrible teacher. Okay, then I'll give you recommendations about other people you might invite in. But I have not gotten an answer either from the school or the district where that took place.
But you tried.
I did try. And by the way, I will continue to. One of the things that I believe in a community like Lancaster, where we are a tiny minority, actually a minority that mirrors the Jewish population of the world, not the country. In the United States, we say we're about 2% of the population.
Yes.
Globally, less than 1/4% of the population. Similar statistics, that second one, the 1/4% is what we are in Lancaster County. I don't blame people for the level of ignorance that we sometimes see. And so I've accepted that it's my responsibility to help educate wherever possible and wherever I'm invited in.
Anti-Semitism has gone up, according to FBI data, by 63% since 2022. Now, anti-Semitism has been with us for like 2,000 years. You have your peaks, and then you have low and peaks. We're in a peak right now.
Yes, we are.
Why is that?
I'm going to give you two answers to that. The first actually goes back a few more years. And I'm going to attach a name to it because I think it's important. During Donald Trump's first term in office, there was the right-wing rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. It ostensibly began as a protest against the removal of Confederate statues honoring Confederate leaders, both military and political. Before the protest was over, the chant was, "Jews will not replace us." It's as if we get dragged into everything.
Jews will not replace
Will not
who?
replace us.
Who?
White. Look, we are seen as advocates for immigration. Well, yes, we are.
But we're a minority. You said only 2%. So how is 2% going to turn that over?
The myth of Jewish power and the myth of Jewish money. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't Jews with money, and I'm not saying that there aren't Jews with power. We enjoy more power in the United States than we ever had in 2,000 years before. There was a time when there were 10 Jewish senators, 10%, in a country where only 2% of the population. Until recently, we were 33% of the Supreme Court. So yes, we have power here that we have not enjoyed anywhere else. Look, we're hearing it now. Donald Trump got dragged into this war with Iran by Benjamin Netanyahu. Really? The prime minister of a country of 7 million, of a country that's the size of New Jersey, of a country that has really no natural resources, and Donald Trump got dragged into this by Benjamin Netanyahu?
But didn't Rubio say he did in that famous press conference? And Obama came out today and he said that he tried to do the same, Israel tried to do the same thing to him.
And somehow he failed. They failed. Yes, any country wants other countries to fight their battles for them. Israel didn't want to have to go to war with Iran if we can get the United States to do it. But is that anything new? Is that anything new at all?
Except we did it this time.
Except we did it. So is that a statement about Benjamin Netanyahu? Or if we believe that, is that a statement about Donald Trump?
Are you for or are you opposed to the war that we're at right now with Iran?
I think there are two elements to this war. Am I for eliminating the Iranian nuclear capabilities? Yes, I do believe that Iran destabilizes the region. Do I believe here, by the way, that Israel is doing the bidding of other countries? Well, the more liberal Arab countries are thrilled that Israel and the United States are bearing the brunt of this. Saudi Arabia would love to take out Iran. The Emirates would love, Bahrain, they would love to take out Iran.
Is that because of the Sunni versus
Sunni Shiite? It's also competition for oil money. Let's understand this on every level. Oh, we got Israel and the United States to fight this battle. We have to deal with a rocket or a missile once in a while. Fine, we'll deal with it. But we got the United States and Israel to deal with this.
So are you for or are you
Am I
opposed?
for or against? I would be for it if there was really a plan for it. And I'm not seeing evidence of that. If the plan was really, look, let's be honest. How many times since this has started, have we been told the Iranian Navy doesn't exist anymore? The Iranian missile capacity is gone, and yet somehow they're still firing weapons. So to me, there was no real plan behind this war. It was either a gross failure of intelligence or someone jumped into this. So I don't believe it's being conducted in the best way. Now, having said that, an asterisk that I will always add to conversations like this. I'm not a diplomat. I'm not a political scientist. I don't have a doctorate in Middle Eastern studies. I am not a military expert. So with all those disclaimers, I can only tell you what I believe based on what I know.
Which you just did.
Yes.
Do you think the war has created more anti-Semitism? And because the majority of Americans, according to the polls, are not supporting the war. But do you think that people are putting Israelis as Jews instead of separating them, that these are Americans first before they're Jewish? And 55% of Jewish Americans are opposed to the war. But I have somebody I interviewed, a constitutional lawyer, who is MAGA, a conservative Republican who opposes the war. And because of that, he's being called a Nazi, an anti-Semite. So all this is kind of getting confused, isn't it?
It certainly is. And by the way, you can go to Israel, and I can say this with certainty because I've been to Israel 4 times since October 7th, 2023. You talk to different Israelis, you'll get different opinions. There was a big convention in Israel just last week calling for peace among different grassroots Israeli-Palestinian peacemaking organizations. These organizations are growing. Their voice is louder and louder. And I stand with those people. Now back to your question. It's not that Israelis are being considered Jews, it's that Jews are being considered Israelis. And that's what's getting blurred. I'm not an Israeli. I've traveled there frequently. I love Israel. I despise Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't think his policies are helpful for Israelis or for Jews, except many people in the United States will rally behind this cry of, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist. But what was it? 6 weeks ago, someone drove his car into a synagogue in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, the largest Reform synagogue in the country. They're not Israeli, they're Jews. Attacks on Orthodox Jews in New York City. But this is not just the past 2.5 years. We had the hostage situation at a synagogue in Colleyville, Texas. We have the shootings, the murders, the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh.
When was that? When did that happen?
I want to say it's 2017 or 2018. Okay. I don't recall exactly. So, again, nothing new. Has it gone up since October 7th, 2023? Absolutely.
But the majority of Israelis support the war with Iran and what's happening in Gaza with Hamas, correct?
It depends how you define majority.
According to the polls that
Yes.
I read.
Is it a huge majority? I don't believe it is. It is interesting. On October 7th, 2023, there was a sense of unity in Israel that hadn't existed not only in Israel, but among Jews in centuries. But as the war went on, as more and more Palestinians in Gaza were dying, as food was being kept out of Gaza, more and more, not a majority, but more and more Israelis turned against it. More and more Israelis, for a variety of reasons, were angry at having to do military reserve duty, which is obligatory for most Jews in Israel. Why were they objecting to that? Because a segment of the Israeli population doesn't serve. While reservists, not active duty, reservists were serving 6-9 months, called up in the reserves. So there were many elements to it. It was the humanitarian element of what's happening to the Palestinians, and also the Israeli internal political conversation about how this was being carried out.
Were you able to go into Palestine when you were there?
So Palestine's an interesting word, right?
Right.
I've been to the Gaza. Interestingly, many years ago, I was on the Gaza Strip. Before 2007, the Gaza Strip was under Israeli control and had been since 1967. I had been on the Gaza Strip. I've been on the West Bank. On my last trip to Israel, which was in October, November, it was last fall, I went out to the West Bank twice. Now, I have a general policy that I won't travel to the West Bank as a tourist. I've gone 2 times that trip, 1 time the trip before, to meet Palestinians and to hear their stories and to meet with grassroots peacemaking organizations. And that's something that I've made somewhat of a personal mission, to meet with as many of these groups as I can and to do my best from my very small pulpit here to be able to amplify their voices.
Did you meet with the settlers too?
I've met with settlers also, absolutely.
Are they as hostile to the Palestinians as we read about?
Let me give you an example of one of these peacemaking organizations. In English, it translates into Roots. It has a Hebrew name, it has an Arabic name. It is made up of unlikely people, West Bank Jewish settlers and Palestinians, engaged in the work together of peacemaking. So how do they come together? They have come to the conclusion that I'm not going anywhere and you're not going anywhere, so how do we make this work?
That's a good question. How do you make it work?
Well, and so they're doing their absolute best. A story that I think has value. One of the leaders of the organization is an Orthodox rabbi by the name of Hanan Schlesinger. He moved to the West Bank actually from the United States. He moved to Israel from the United States. I want to say from the Chicago area. That may not be accurate. And he became a West Bank settler. And he was asked to go to a meeting. And he was reluctant. He went anyway. And a line that he uses regularly that I quote him on that sticks with me. He said, when I went to this meeting, I realized that we need to learn to listen until it hurts and then listen some more.
Why would it hurt?
I don't want to be told that I'm an occupier. I don't want to be told that I'm a colonizer. I don't want to be told on the other side that I'm a terrorist. But that's the lived experience of some of these people.
I mean, some of the Palestinians.
And some of the Israelis who see it, and every Palestinian see a terrorist. Because in some cases, that's their lived experience. So how do we learn to listen even beyond the point where it starts to hurt? How do we learn to listen when someone is holding a mirror up for us to look at ourselves and see what we're perpetrating?
It's that old cliche, you never know unless you've lived in those person's shoes.
Absolutely.
So now they have to see that there's another person there that experiences something totally different than they do.
I'm going to use this opportunity to plug a book, not one that I wrote, but it's one that I am encouraging people to read. It's called The Future is Peace, jointly written by an Israeli and a Palestinian. The Israeli is named Maoz Inon. The Palestinian is Aziz Abu Sarah. Maoz Inon lost both of his parents on October 7th. Aziz has lost a number of family members to this ongoing conflict over many years. Most traumatically for him, the death of his brother when Aziz himself was very young. They could easily turn to anger. Both of them have turned towards peace building.
It's a great story.
And this book, which I believe at this current moment is number 5 on the New York Times bestseller list, outlines their pain, their hope, the ways in which words are used. For a long time, I didn't like the idea of using words like the occupation. That troubled me as a Jew and as a Zionist. Well, I have to see that now. When I look at what's being carried out by not the Hanan Schlesingers among the settlers, but the violent settlers who are burning down Palestinian homes, who are depriving Palestinians of their water. I need to come to terms with a word like occupation. It hurts.
Are they full of hate, the settlers? Why are they burning it down? Because they see, like you had just mentioned, every Palestinian is a terrorist? Where are they getting that idea from?
Where are they getting it from? Keep in mind, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was, as far as I'm concerned in terms of the political world, the last great hope for peace. He was assassinated by a Jew who believed that Rabin was selling Israel out. Rabin had been at a peace rally in Tel Aviv. He had just finished singing with everyone else a song in Hebrew called Shir L'Shalom, a song for peace. And as he was leaving the rally, he was assassinated. Where does he get it from? In some cases, they're getting it from their rabbis. In some cases, they're getting it from demagogues among the political leaders.
Ben Gvir.
Okay? Ben Gvir, Smotrich, these are dangerous people. And we need to be cautious. Now, in other cases, it's religiously motivated. Keep in mind that when talking about Israel in the sense of the Torah, not later under King David, but in the sense of the Torah, most of those stories took place on what is now the West Bank. Tel Aviv didn't exist. Haifa didn't exist. Ashdod, Ashkelon, I can name all these places. We don't know anything about them from the Torah. So for them, the West Bank, even more than other places in Israel, that's the Holy Land to these Jews, to these settler Jews. It's also, again, I said, both text and history.
Even though it didn't exist in the Torah.
So the West Bank did. Not identified as the West Bank, but these cities. We read about Shechem, we read about Hebron. These are all West Bank cities. And this is the focal point of where the Torah stories, the Genesis stories, took place. So yes, Israel existed. We believed it was the promised land. We believe it was the land that God told Abraham to go to and directed us to return to after slavery in Egypt. But for these folks, the Torah Israel was West Bank. Later on, when we come back from slavery in Egypt, then it's a bigger piece of land that's divided among the tribes. And even later, under King David, a great deal of conquest that made the borders even larger. But Torah Israel was West Bank.
I see. I have some questions that I want to ask you from some listeners that wrote me they'd like to ask you. One is from Ari Warner, and he says, there is a rise in Gen Z and millennials returning to Catholicism called trade calf. Is there any of this in Judaism? If not, then why?
We have to understand that Judaism is different from Catholicism in a couple of ways. For Catholicism, the focal point is the church. For Jews, the focal point is community. The synagogue may be part of that community, may be a large part of that community, but there's more to it than that. There are organizations that support Jewish education, Jewish learning, Jewish community, Jewish philanthropy. So engagement with the Jewish community looks very different than it does in Catholicism or in the Christian world. If we're looking at engagement, the answer is yes. We've seen younger Jews connecting in different ways, not necessarily at the synagogue.
Are more youth, Jewish youth, coming to Judaism?
If in the sense of Jewish community, yes.
But not the synagogue?
Not necessarily the synagogue.
So they're involved in the community as a Jew, or what?
They're involved in Jewish civic organizations. The local Jewish Community Relations Council, the local Jewish Community Center, other local and national organizations. I mentioned before Immigration and HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which was founded to help Jews settle in this country. It now serves refugees and immigrants of all kinds coming into the United States and advocates on their behalf. So there are many other avenues for identification with Jewish community than the synagogue.
Pamela asked, does he see in his study of the Old Testament or Torah evidence of these writings having projections of these wars of nations against nations? Are we seeing this in our lifetime?
Look, I think there is a significant part of evangelical Christianity and perhaps even a tiny, tiny part of Judaism that wants to see end-of-day prophecies here. I don't see that. What I do see when we look about the end of war, famously, nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn war anymore. That's a messianic prophecy. Now, if you ask me, is the Messiah on his way? I will tell you, I don't know, but if he arrives, let me know. And until then, I'm going to do the best I can to help bring that world about.
So you don't necessarily see this as projections in the Torah?
I don't.
Okay. And Sharon asks, what peace building are you and your congregation doing locally?
There are several things happening locally. One is we are currently working with the Friends Meeting and other organizations to sponsor bringing a film and a lecturer from the organization Combatants for Peace to Lancaster. Combatants for Peace is exactly what it sounds like. Former Israeli soldiers and former Palestinian combatants, Hamas, Hezbollah, who are working together to help bring about peace.
How many are in that organization?
I can't give you a precise number. I can tell you that it's growing.
Are you making progress with it?
I am doing my best to amplify their voices. So if someone wants to give me $300,000, I'm going to be very specific here. I mentioned this peace conference that took place in Israel last week. I want that to happen in the United States because one thing that we don't see is any news about that in the American media. I don't care if it's left-wing media or right-wing media. You'll read, if one person gets killed, you'll read about that. And I'm not minimizing the death of one person in any way. But when thousands are doing peace work, that never makes the news here.
To bring the Palestinians
I want to bring the Palestinians and the Israelis to the United States. I want to get the media there. And I want to hold a conference where the Americans can understand what these efforts are all about. I shouldn't be in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, one of the relatively few voices who are preaching this. I want to help their message grow throughout the United States.
Years ago, I interviewed a former, Mossad. He was head of the Mossad. And I was surprised because he wanted peace. He says, if we don't have peace, what's the alternative? And he was head of Mossad.
Look, the Mossad, Israel's secret service, if you will, is designed to keep Israelis safe. That doesn't mean that people working with Mossad don't crave peace. Keep in mind, There's no such thing as a household in Israel and in the West Bank and in Gaza that hasn't been touched personally and directly by the ongoing state of war. There's no such thing, if you go to Israel, as someone who doesn't know someone who died on October 7th or who was killed in a previous battle of one kind or another. This is deeply personal for Israelis. Not to want peace, I think, is craziness, honestly. But some on both sides would still prefer conquest.
Another part of the question she asks, what are your concerns for your congregation here in Lancaster?
Honestly, I think for many of us, our biggest concern is loneliness.
Loneliness.
You know, after the Tree of Life murders in Pittsburgh, there was a great deal of outreach from the Christian and general communities. How can we stand with you? How can we show solidarity with you? The next Friday night for our Sabbath Eve service, we had over 300 people who came to our service. Our sanctuary doesn't accommodate 300 people. They were standing throughout our building. We were showing this on a live stream in our own social hall because it was overflow from the sanctuary. There was nothing similar after October 7th. There was a great deal of silence, and there continues to be. One of the things I've been forced to learn personally, I thought I was building not only alliances, but friendships with people in the broader community who are working for justice. And if I thought of these people as friends, I would have expected some outreach. Jack, I don't like what Israel does, but I support you and I'm concerned about you. That was almost non-existent and has been, for the most part, since October 7th.
Do you feel lonely?
Do I feel lonely? I've learned to say that these were never friendships in the first place. They were partnerships working for similar causes, but they weren't necessarily friendships. Do I feel lonely? I wouldn't say lonely anymore. Disappointed? Yes.
Why didn't they reach out, whereas they did before?
I think in some cases it's the ambiguity of how do we understand Israel? How do we understand people who love Israel? The understanding that everyone who says, I'm a Zionist, as I proudly do, is blindly supporting every Netanyahu policy. I don't support many of the Netanyahu policies.
So what is a Zionist then?
A Zionist is someone who believes that there must be a sovereign Jewish nation. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't also be a sovereign Palestinian nation. It doesn't mean that Palestinians living as citizens of Israel, and some will argue with my terminology on that, shouldn't enjoy the same benefits of citizenship that Israelis do.
Do you know there's over 2 million Israeli Arab citizens in Israel as well? Over 2 million.
So I mentioned that someone might take issue with my terminology. For many years, we referred to Israeli Arabs. Many of them now are referring to themselves as Palestinian Israelis. What are they centering about their identity? Their Israeli citizenship or their Palestinian identity? Yes, and not only that, but what people don't understand, there are Palestinians who are members of the Knesset, Israel's parliament. There are Palestinians who attend Israeli universities. So we talk about apartheid, we talk about genocide. We throw words around very casually in this country. And yet we have to acknowledge that they're not always accurate. They might serve a political purpose or a social purpose, but they're largely inaccurate.
They're labels.
Yes, exactly.
Do you think there is a genocide going on in Gaza?
Do I think there's a genocide? No, I do not. If there was a genocide, it would have been over on October 8th. It would have been over in 1967. That's not to say that I believe that every Israeli policy regarding Gaza is correct. I don't. But I do not believe this is a genocide.
We've run out of time, and I'd like to leave with a message that you have for our listeners.
I always try to end with what we call a nechemta, which is a message of comfort, a message of hope. And I find that in these peacemaking organizations. I find that in individuals like Maoz, and Aziz. These are the people doing the very difficult, very courageous work of peacemaking. And if those people living there,
Where's there?
Israel, Palestine, West Bank, use whatever words you want, if they're doing this work, having suffered the deeply personal losses they have, then that's where I find comfort and that's where I find hope. And I hope we can explore, all your listeners can learn to explore the many peacemaking organizations doing this incredible work.
Would that include making peace in Lebanon and Iran as well?
Absolutely, over time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. As a post-interview clarification, because Rabbi Paskoff is currently in talks with the Lancaster schools, he doesn't want to name them since it could damage their relationships.